Hey, how you doing? Justin here. Today we're going to continue our adventure making the changes with an absolutely killer exercise that's going to help you change between your A7 and D7 arpeggios. I know that sounds a little bit dry, but it's a really, really important skill if you're going to make the changes in the blues. Moving from the 1 chord to the 4 chord, using the arpeggios is really, really, really cool. This exercise will help you do it really, really well. If you dig my lessons, please hit that subscribe button down there. I really appreciate your support. Remember, there's going to be lesson notes over on the website as well, neck diagrams, a guitar profile that you can play along with to do this exercise, that kind of thing. So this exercise is called the arpeggiator. I first learned it in 1996 when I was a student at the Guitar Institute in London. The teacher was Iain Scott. He explained this idea. It was in a jazz context. I think we were looking at playing 2-5-1 jazz sequences using arpeggios. But I immediately saw the benefits for using a blues progression, which was kind of more where my head was at. And within a couple of weeks, it had made a huge impact on my ability to make the changes in the blues. And I'm really hoping it'll do the same for you. But it's a thinker. It wants to be at the beginning of your practice schedule, not the end, because if you've been jamming for ages, you're not going to want to come back to doing this one. And before you even think about starting it, you want to be absolutely confident with your A7 and your D7 arpeggio shapes. So like really, really know them well. So you want to be able to play A7 and D7. Like absolutely know them, not have to think about it. If you have to think about it, this exercise is going to be next to impossible. Okay? The idea is we're going to play 8 notes of one arpeggio, so 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and, 1 bar's worth of 8th notes on one arpeggio. At the end of that bar, in the same direction, so whether we're ascending or descending, we're going to go to the next note in the next arpeggio. So from A7, we finish the arpeggio, we look for the next note. If we're going up, we look for the next note in D7 arpeggio, and we continue the same direction until we reach as far as we can in any given position of any one area of the neck. Then we turn around and we start going down. We're just going to do 8 notes on A7, 8 notes on D7. In the early stages, you're going to have to do this super slow, really super slow. That's okay. It's okay to stop and think about it in the early stages. Eventually, you want to be able to do it with a metronome and not allow yourself to stop at all. But initially, you're going to have to stop and think about it. That's dead normal. I just had a quick go at doing this myself, and it's like, I haven't done this exercise for a long time, and I found it challenging again. It's a tricky one. It's good, but it's fantastic for you. Okay, so let's get to a close-up and check out how to do it. So we're starting here. We're going to play 8 notes of an A7 arpeggio. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Now we want to think about what the next note is in the same direction that's in the D7 arpeggio. So you need to kind of overlay this arpeggio from here. You think, what's the next note still going up in the D? And it's this note. Now we can still got one more note going up for the D7. So we've gone A7, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, D7, 1, 2. Then we've reached the limit of what we can in this area of the neck, so we're going to move down. 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Now the next note still heading down, melodically down, physically up, to the A7 arpeggio. It would be this note. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Now the next note going up in a D7 arpeggio is this note. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Now we need the next note going down in A. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. We're now in D. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. In A7. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. D. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. A. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. D. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. A. 2, 5, 6, 7, 8, D, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. I mucked up that last note there. Good thing I was about to stop anyway, I guess, because I was thinking about how I'm going to explain this next bit to you. So you need to be aware of the stages. The first thing that's going to happen the first time you try and do it, it's going to seem very, very, very difficult. You're going to have to really stop and think about the arpeggios. You might even have to play a bit of each one to be able to navigate your way through. What's going to happen is eventually you'll build up kind of a mental picture of what the arpeggio looks like on the fretboard. And that's a really, really helpful thing. Really, really helpful to have that, to kind of being able to place a map. You've seen those like fret light guitars where they have little lights that light up under the fret depending on the scale or the chord. For the arpeggios, you kind of want to develop that in your mind so that you can look at it and see where the arpeggio is formed on the fretboard. If you can get that, that's an incredible skill, really, really useful. So that's the first step. Don't be disheartened if you find it that difficult that you have to really stop and think about it. Once you've got through that and you start to feel a bit more confident that you know where the notes are, you want to start doing it with a metronome, but just really, really, really slowly. Don't even think about trying to... Speed is not the goal here. Accuracy is the goal, and understanding the relationship between the arpeggios, seeing which ones are different, which ones are the same, how easily they step. Like where the smaller steps are between the arpeggios, you know, those kind of things. You'll start to notice that a lot more the more you do it. Those things will become more and more important and more useful. You might find that starting on different notes also helps you get this together, because if you always start on the lowest root note on A, it'll form a pattern, which can be useful as well. It can be useful to do that. But sometimes starting on a different note will mean you get a totally different set of points where the arpeggios cross over, which can also be really helpful. Okay, so that's something that you want to think about as well, is just changing up where you start rather than it being the same place every time. I would recommend at least a few weeks on just that arpeggiator exercise, just really trying to hone in. 5 minutes a day on that kind of exercise is kind of what you want to be aiming for. Don't go overboard, because you might hurt your brain. It is very thinky and it can be quite complicated, and you don't want to suck all of the joy out of music by doing this overly complicated exercise, right? That's not the point. It's really good for you, so you want to do it, but just don't overdo it. Okay, still spend time enjoying playing the blues and exploring vocabulary and all of that sort of stuff. So this is a great, after you've done a 5-10 minute warm up on the guitar, this is a great exercise to pop in nice and early into a routine if you've got one. Now, before you progress any further than doing just A7 and D7, linking those two arpeggios, you should also spend a bit of time making it musical. So setting up a little loop that's just moving between the A7 and the D7, and not just forcing yourself to play eighth notes, but just exploring how they link together. Because that's really where you start to get beautiful music ideas coming out. Because making those changes is something that's great for the listener and for you to listen to as well. You'll hear where those changes happen, and it's just sweet, It really works well on a musical level. So the more you can explore that in a musical context and try and note them. I'm not saying you should write down every lick, but if you come across something that you're playing that's really nice, that works really well for you, write it down. Get a little pad out, or I sometimes these days video myself doing, like, if I come across a cool little lick or whatever, just so I remember the fingering. You might want to try doing that as well. I think that can be really helpful. So in order to do that, you just want to set up a little A7 to D7 loop. So you can take it as far or as little as you like. A couple of things if you're finding it difficult that might help. First one is to think about just the thin strings, because most of the time you're going to be soloing on the thinner strings. So it can be really helpful, rather than trying to think of like this whole massive arpeggio, just to think of A7 being this and D7 being that. Or even just the thinnest two strings, or the thinnest one string if you're struggling too much. The idea is that we try to make it manageable, so only you know what you're really capable of and where you find it really difficult, remembering that you want to keep it musical. If it becomes this big complicated exercise, it's never going to happen in your playing for real. So longer term it starts to mix in. I started doing it toward the end there just to show you that you can start mixing all of your regular blues vocabulary in with this idea. Because remember, in a 12-bar blues you can choose to play the minor pentatonic for the whole thing. You don't have to go A7, D7, A7, you know, over the 12-bar blues sequence. You can choose to play the minor pentatonic over the lot. So longer term, you end up thinking, okay, I can play the minor pentatonic over the whole lot, but where am I going to start highlighting the chords? Am I going to highlight the A7? Am I going to highlight the D7? Where am I going to be making those changes? Obviously, in a whole sequence, you've got the 5 chord as well. Generally dealing with the 5 chord, it's the same stuff that we play on the D7, but up 2 frets. Or you ignore it and just play minor pentatonic. There's lots of choices. So that would really be, again, this is, for me, this is months of work, not a couple of weeks work. You want to think about making this really good and musical and not rush it. So when you're moving from the arpeggio to your standard blues licks, try and make it seamless. Try and not make it like the scale, like the, you know, the minor pentatonic scale into the arpeggio and then out again. See if you can find ways where you can kind of blend them together. Use a little bit of a regular lick that you might use and find a way of manipulating it so that it's a little bit more following the arpeggio. So over on the website, I'm going to include a Guitar Pro version of the full arpeggiator exercise as far as I can take it until I'll see where it starts looping around itself. Maybe I'll give you a couple of options on the starting point as well. Do remember to check out the arpeggio shapes as well, just to give you a sneaky idea of what's to come that might either freak you out or inspire you. This is just one way of changing between the A7 and the D7. Now, obviously there are 5 patterns there, so you've got this A7 here and D7. So you've got another, you should be able to, longer term, be able to do this same idea all over the neck, to be able to play A7 to D7 here. And here. And here. Then you get the idea. There's a lot of stuff here, a lot of different patterns to explore, a lot of different ways of incorporating the licks and joining them together. I must admit that I tend to find I'm still thinking around the pentatonic a lot and highlighting the arpeggio tones rather than just strictly moving from one arpeggio to the other, although I practice it all. And I think there's something to be said for practicing all of that stuff beyond what you'd actually need it. So I don't really need to do that, but practicing it meant that it makes it kind of easy to make it musical when I choose to go for it in that way. So I hope all of this makes a lot of sense. Do subscribe to my YouTube channel if you're over there. Click the link in the description to get the extra notes for registered users over on the website. I'll see you for plenty more very soon. You take care of yourselves. Bye-bye.